All right, hello, welcome everyone. My name is Chris Cole. I'm currently the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement at the American Marketing Association. I'm here to welcome you all to our Marketer Like Me series. This series will be a set of interviews hosted by the AMA, an effort to highlight the diverse narratives and best practices from senior leaders of color in the marketing industry. I will have the pleasure of moderating a casual yet insightful conversation with my guests today, highlighting their journey into the field, incorporating how DEI has contributed to their experiences, and sharing lessons learned along the way. So I have the privilege of being joined by Vicki, who is the head of global marketing at Adidas. And I'll let her kick us off by taking a few minutes to introduce herself and briefly share a little bit about what they do in the current role.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you to the AMA for this series. Very excited to be in discussion with you today. So a little bit about me. I have been in the marketing industry at a leadership level for many years, working with quite a few brands. I am a girl raised in the South. We call that a grit. And so it very much so forms the basis of my leadership style and my career and life ambitions that I'll talk about a little later. In my current role as the head of global marketing for Adidas, interestingly, I'm the first woman and the first person of color to hold this gig. It's a really big role for a brand that has 70 years of legacy, shaping style and culture and sport in ways that are continuing to evolve today. So I'm really excited. It's a global role, and I consider it a privilege to lead a global team of creative marketers to help us really chart the next 70 years of this amazing brand.
Well, thank you so much again for taking the time today. I'm excited to dive into the interview. And just based on your experience and a little bit of what you shared, I think there's going to be a lot for us to kind of be able to pull in. So excited to get started.
Thank you.
So as we're talking about marketing, we are the American Marketing Association. So we live, breathe all things marketing. So we kind of talk about how you got into this point. As you think back, why did you choose marketing, or why have you kind of found your niche in that space in this industry?
Gosh, great question. So here's the funny thing. I always wanted to be a journalist. I thought I would be the next Carol Simpson or the next Al Roker. What's interesting is my career took an interesting path. I started out as a beat reporter on an ABC network, WOLO, channel 25 in Columbia, South Carolina. It doesn't exist as such anymore. But that foundation, that heat-seeking missile for the truth, that heat-seeking desire to understand consumers and communities and to represent their needs and aspirations through communications is sort of foundational. And when I describe it that way, I think you can see the connective tissue between journalism and marketing.
Yeah.
So I found that my ability to communicate my ideas verbally and on paper was a fundamental skill that helps me be successful in marketing. I tell everyone that I work with and all students that I mentor is that if you have an idea, it's only real if you can put it on paper and someone else can pick it up and understand it. It sounds simple, but it really is a powerful game changer and a differentiator from people who have great ideas and those who can actually articulate their ideas and move them forward. I describe marketing at the very simplest level as an invitation. We are inviting consumers to do something, to take some action. And when I talk to young kids and explain my career, I talk to them like, let's assume you're throwing a party. The way that you invite people will differ by what you know about them. Some people you might want to whisper, others you may want to tell their friends, others you might want to send a formal invitation. It is that level of insights paired with, well, what happened at the last party? Who came, who didn't come? What were their motivations? What kind of music do they like? That's the data and the insight. And that helps you shape the invitation. And so when I talk about it that way, obviously it's far more complex. But in some ways, it's not. It really comes down to that level of simplicity of combining the data, which tells you what happened, insights that tell you what's possible,
Mhm.
and to frame your communications in a way that's going to connect with the hearts, minds, and wallets of those people that you want to take action.
No, thank you for that. I think that's actually the first time I've heard marketing described in that context. And it like, I had a light bulb in my own head. So I think I appreciate just the act of that invitation, really kind of resonates of like kind of breaking down marketing, because I didn't come from a traditional marketing background, and working with marketers, those are the things that you start to unravel, that marketing touches a lot, but many of us are exuding those marketing skill sets in many different ways. But, I love just that approach that you kind of broke it down in that sense, because you kind of get that full scope of it, and it makes sense for those that are, thinking about going into the career, thinking about maybe pursuing marketing. So kind of somewhat along those lines, what's some advice that you might give someone wanting to pursue a career similar to yours, or in this field and industry and marketing, of things that maybe you've looked back at that help you understand that?
Well, so the letter I would write to my younger self would be never stop learning,
Mhm.
always, always off, always, always ask questions, be curious, never stop being the consumer. So what I mean by that, even today, in my world, leading over 2,500 marketers across our global footprint at Adidas, I am most excited when I'm in the marketplace, being a consumer, shopping our stores, shopping our number one store on our app, and shopping the competition. And it's a multi-sensory experience. What do I see? What do I feel? What do I hear? Of being observant, not only of what other consumers are doing, but even my path as I'm walking through the footprint of our locations and or our competitors. Never, ever stop being a consumer, and make sure that in any room that you're in, right, whether you're on a Teams call, a Zoom call, or actually physically in the room together, make space, hold space for the consumer. We talk about being consumer obsessed, but often we're not activating that. And so I will often save a space, a seat for the consumer, so that we are reminding ourselves, what is the consumer experience? What does the consumer expect? What does the consumer need? How can we surprise and delight them with new ways of thinking, different questions? And so the note to myself would be, never lose that youthful curiosity, and never let fear get in the way of asking a question. Any question can elevate the conversation. And more often than not, if you have a question and you're brave enough to put it on the table, you're going to help other people around the room who didn't have the bravery to ask the question.
No, I love that. I think that resonates with me a lot, and I'm sure with our audience, of, asking those tough questions, especially as we think back in these past 18 months. I feel like that's been a huge part of, how we've integrated, a DEI focus into the work that we do as marketing. A lot of it was asking those tough questions that, may have traditionally never been asked before, or, asked in a more intentional way as we think about the role that marketing plays. And so, curious to kind of hear your thoughts on that as we kind of, transition into, the role that marketing plays when it looks at diversity, equity, inclusion. So if you kind of had your take on it, what do you think, maybe in your role, or just, being in the industry, what role do you think marketing does play as it relates to creating a more diverse, equitable, inclusive industry?
Oh gosh. First of all, it's a great question. All of your questions are great questions. I'll say it this way. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is a team sport. Every aspect of business has an accountability to be successful. Back to being curious and asking the right questions, or asking the questions that are on your heart. I've used this question throughout my career, and it pretty much works in every scenario. And it certainly works in the question you just asked me, which is, how will we know we're successful? So often we say, how will we measure success? What does success look like? But when we ask the question, how will we know when we're successful? You get to a more human level of outcomes. So when I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the role that marketing has to play in my mind is representation, empowerment, and succession planning. And at Adidas, we think of DE&I as a foundational business principle of how we will differentiate ourselves from the competition. Representation. From a marketing perspective, my point of view, and I'm very adamant about that, is I'm not going to story tell about anything we're not story doing. Mm-hmm. So that means we have 60,000 employees, partners at Adidas. We need to make sure that those team members feel like they are working in an environment where the diversity of thought and representation and experience that they bring to the table gives them an equitable position to add value and have a sense of belonging at Adi. If we do that well, our ability to project that through an integrated marketing approach is going to be far more authentic and real with consumers. And so it really starts in-house. That's not the marketing part, but that is how we connect with our human resources teams and that we drive that strategy across the board. Now, when I say representation, people want to see themselves, right? And there's things that the eyes see, right? The physical attributes, but the heart sees on a deeper way, which is an appreciation for the diverse and divergent experiences that we bring to the table. Because the diversity that the eyes see is just one element of the diversity that we all bring to the table. I think that's really important. And then if you have a seat at the table, then the question is empowerment. It's been described that diversity is getting on the team. Equity is getting the ball to play, right? Someone passing you the ball, that's empowerment. And we have to have that at all levels of the organization too. Not just faces for faces, but faces who are driving decisions, financial decisions, spend, investment decisions, where we put resources, who we partner with. That has to be fluid for us to be successful. And so I very much so see my role as the head of marketing as a driver, an agent of change of how we approach DE&I in a credible and measurable way.
Yeah, no, I like shaking my head across all of that because it just resonates so much. And I think one of the pieces that'll stick with me for a while that you just mentioned is, as we think about the role of the marketer, especially as a storyteller, and in order to do that storytelling, we need to be story doing, which, hits to that core piece of, actually doing the work as it relates to that role that marketing plays in this, greater DEI conversation. So thank you for kind of sharing that. And maybe taking a step back as we look at, you can talk a little bit about DEI or just things in general, but, over your career, what do you think has fundamentally changed about your work? And again, maybe specifically with the DEI lens from when you started in your career until now. And maybe a second part to that question, how do you take that as you, continue working your role for like strategies that are coming up in the next 5 to 10 years?
Awesome. Again, another great question. So I have a passion for connecting with the human spirit and telling stories that expose and elevate the human condition. And so that's what gets me excited. And I could do that for a paperclip as much as I can do it for the awesome brand of Adidas, because I really do get excited about the process. It helps when you work for a brand like Adidas, of course. And when I was younger, I was very focused on, and it's pretty common to be focused on that advertising. How big is my budget? What is that advertising expression of the strategic idea that was born from a business objective, and seeing that really come to the consumer? That still gets me excited. That's very much so does. But I've become a much more holistic business leader. And in the role that I play, I've got a team of brilliant leaders that my job is to guide and remove barriers so they can be great. And so over time in my journey, if I do my job well, I am creating space for the leaders on my team to win big in with their personal craft, to win big for the brand, to win big for the communities that we have the honor to serve. And so for me, that is where I am today. I didn't start out there, of course. The other thing I will say is in the spirit of continuous learning, always adding more tools to your toolbox. I actually went back to school and got my MBA from Northwestern at Kellogg School of Business while I worked full time. And everyone has a different path and a different journey to do that. But for me, it was really helpful. Number one, I don't believe you ever lose with more education, period. Number two, I did it while I was still working full time. And the reason that was so powerful for me is because I was able to take these theoretical and philosophical principles and apply them real time. I was at McDonald's at the time. We were launching a new offering that McDonald's had never done before, fresh fruit at a fast food. I was at Kellogg at the time, and I was able to take real principles around supply chain, P&L management, cross-functional team leadership, essentially a foundation around general business management, and apply it through a marketing lens. And it started to round my expertise out as a business leader. And I think marketers today, we are accountable for protecting the brand, no question.
Yeah.
But I think even more, we are accountable for elevating and refining the brand's purpose, which is so much bigger than what we say. It's actually codified in what we do. And so that's the journey I'm on right now at Adidas. We believe through sport, we have the power to change lives. So with every campaign and conversation that I'm in with consumers, I'm always challenging my team and asking myself, for whom and how? Whose lives are we changing and how are we doing it? And that to me, and we know this from consumer research, that's the differentiator. Yeah. That's what activates brand love and brand loyalty that is sustainable over time. And so that's the difference between Vicki today, right? And Vicki, starting out young in her career, who just didn't have that visibility and understanding. But through various experiences, it's gotten me to this place.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think it's just refreshing to kind of also hear that experience as you continue in your career and your journey. There's a lot of lessons that you learn along the way that add that perspective that completely elevate your role as a marketer, your skill set. So it's just nice hearing that there's still a lot of learning that's going to be happening. And I'm again as well a firm believer that every day is a learning experience. So taking that into the work that we do in this space is just great to continue to take that approach with. So and kind of like building on that a little bit, there's probably like two areas that I wanted to touch a little bit about as we kind of like wrap up all these great insights that we're sharing today. One part is, as you talked about, you continuing your education, that seemed like it was a really great resource or tool for you. As you kind of look back, is there, certain resources or things in your toolkit that, you can look back and, say those things really helped me along that way as that journey that we were talking about? Were there specific mentors, resources, toolkits that kind of pulled out from that connect to you now that, as I mentioned, looking back really helped you along that journey that we just talked about?
Absolutely. So, oh gosh, how will I answer that? There have been so many moments. I call them mentoring moments. I actually can't say that I've ever had a consistent long-term mentor. But I'm a big believer in mentoring moments and building a network of people that you respect, people whose expertise and experiences you aspire to have, and developing a rapport with them so you can get some real-time feedback. And I think of it as how do I bring value to them and how can I extract value out of them? Not in a transactional way, but in a way that is it illuminates what my opportunities or choices are. So I've had many of those throughout my career. It's really important. And I always seek to find those relationships with people who have similar values, but actually may have different perspectives, if that makes any sense, right? They may not look like me. They may come from a different cul-de-sac mentality, but we believe in certain principles: integrity, diversity, inclusion, positive mindset. Think about the values, but they actually may look very different than I do, and their journey may be very different from mine. I find that most helpful. So my career has spanned the fast food industry with McDonald's, entertainment with Turner, Time Warner, BT, Viacom, and the Walt Disney Company, and now at Adidas. And in every role, I was intentional in building a network outside of my job, industry, active participation in industry organizations that just helped me think bigger, that introduced me to people who may be in similar positions along my journey. AMA is certainly one of those. And so this is the kind of hustle that I think is required for those of us who are serious about our craft. That networking is critical. Even today, I am a part of BECA, which is the Black Executive CMO Alliance. And it's a network of Black CMOs across the United States and globally. And we connect for the simple reason of paying it forward. How do we help each other? How do we, partner in times of need and times of celebration? And then how do we make sure that we are building a pipeline of successors? And in the DEI conversation, the succession planning is often one of the weakest links. And we owe it to our community, right, to make sure that we are supporting, lifting up, driving exposure, championing, and coaching that next level of leaders. And so whether it's AMA, BECA, I could go on, there's so many others. I think that is absolutely critical to just being resilient, building your resilience, building a network of support, and just refining your craft.
Yeah. Oh, thank you again for sharing that. I think, again, it just hits on, the importance of those relationships across that journey, especially at a time where, as we've been dealing with the global pandemic and things that happen in our world, that community, that network of folks that you can kind of rely on through those different times, creates that consistent sense of community that I think is hugely important, especially as we look at, human-centered approach of our work and having that connection. So it just makes me further emphasize that, it really does take a village, and, having that village there for you throughout that process with, the work that you have mentioned, the organizations that you've had, really contributes to really that great success and, opportunities that you probably didn't realize existed. And as you mentioned, the diverse perspectives of thought that really help us hone out and become a better holistic marketer in that sense. So.
Can I say one more thing, Chris? I didn't say this earlier, and I won't sleep tonight if I don't say it. You asked me, what would I do differently? What did I learn earlier? And if I'm really honest and transparent, it was really hard for me to ask for help early in my career. As a person of color, often sitting in rooms where you're the only one, where you might be the only one from your family who's ever sat in a room like that. And you haven't had the role modeling and understanding to find your seat and your voice in this place. We suffer from, basically questioning whether we belong in the room, right?
Imposter syndrome.
Yes, imposter syndrome. Thank you.
Yes.
What I would say to my younger self is, if you're in the room, you deserve to be. And you have to keep telling yourself that. At the same time, it doesn't mean that you have all the answers. And don't burden yourself with having to know everything before you speak up. Learn to ask for help, and ask for help early. We often ask for help when it's fire. Build the muscle to ask for help. And there's a little trick that that I can't even remember who told me this. Actually, I do remember, I think it was Don Thompson, who was CEO at McDonald's at the time. And he said, help is a hard word, but everybody wants to be a coach. Everybody wants to be a coach. So when you need help and you know someone who may have the insight, the expertise that you need, you go to them and say, can you coach me on this? The energy around can you coach me versus can you help me? It's a different vibration. Yeah. And for me, it was a really big difference in, frankly, wrestling my ego, which was becoming a barrier, right? A real challenge for me to go and say, I need some coaching on this. I don't quite understand this report. Can you help me understand what the key takeaways are? Coach me on how to synthesize these reports because we are often inundated with data. I heard a quote the other day that says, we've had a radical increase in information and a radical decrease in communication. And it's true. It's absolutely true. We are overwhelmed with information, but communication is a dying art. And so use coaching as your entryway to get the insights, the support that you need. And that's what I would tell the younger Vicki that I know today that I didn't know then.
Thank you. I feel like that's a great way to kind of wrap up this great conversation that we've had. I feel like I'm learning so much and jotting things down in my head internally of, some of these gems that you're dropping, especially as it relates to wrestling with that piece that you're just talking about of, those expectations and the difficulty of asking for help is real. So hopefully our audience and viewers, are able to take some of that essence and, pull in some of those really great gems that we've been able to share today. So as we wrap up, I just wanted to again say thank you again for taking this time. I know having these conversations is great, but for me, and I'm hoping for our audience listening in and watching, that these kinds of things that we're talking about resonate with you. You're able to take something away from our conversation today that maybe you didn't have in your toolkit or in your head as you move forward as we continue this great work. So I just want to continue to say thank you so much, Vicki, again, for taking the time to share your story and have this conversation. It's been a privilege and an opportunity to get this conversation with you and share it with our AMA community, and especially an effort to continue to highlight these diverse narratives in this industry and have an opportunity to kind of share that with other folks across this industry. So thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you, AMA. Thank you, Chris, for this platform. It's very exciting, and I'm honored to be a part of it.